We all start out whole, weird, loud, curious, full of fire. Then somewhere along the way, we learn to edit ourselves, to polish, to please, to perform. You don't notice it at first. A yes when you meant maybe, a silence when your gut screamed no, a decision you made just to fit in, and suddenly, you've become a carefully curated version of yourself, likable, marketable, and quietly dying inside. This video is about the ways we slowly ruin our own personalities, not with one big mistake, but with 1,000 small betrayals. If any of these hit you, it's not to shame you, it's to remind you that you were never meant to be an echo. Before starting, if you're still here, like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. Let's begin. You stopped forming opinions a long time ago. Maybe it happened slowly, maybe it was overnight, but somewhere along the way, your voice stopped feeling like your own. You became everyone's favorite echo. You agree, you nod, you repost, you hashtag, you quote others with conviction, but you haven't sat alone with your own mind in weeks. That inner silence you mistake for peace? It's actually abandonment. You ghosted your thoughts. Why risk thinking when you can belong? And belonging is powerful. It's primal. No one wants to be the one left out of the group chat, the awkward one at the table with a weird opinion, the one who doesn't get it. So you choose the safe route. Mimic, reflect, mirror. It's easier to become a social chameleon than to risk standing out as a lizard. This is how most people unknowingly delete their uniqueness by outsourcing their identity to the collective. We all crave resonance, but in the process, many surrender their originality like it's dead weight, and you don't even realize it, because being an echo makes you feel smart, even enlightened. You quote the right people, you watch the right documentaries, you say the right things about the world, but none of it is yours. You've adopted convictions without living them, opinions without questioning them, pain without processing it, and dreams that don't even belong to you. It feels good to sound intelligent, doesn't it? But parroting intelligence is not the same as living in wisdom. There's a vast difference between knowing what to say and knowing what you believe. In trying to stay relevant, you've traded your essence for applause. You perform correctness because silence is dangerous, and disagreement, even worse. It might cost you likes, friends, identity, safety, so you hide behind consensus and call it connection. But connection without honesty is just performance in disguise. This slow erosion of self isn't loud, it's subtle, elegant, deceiving. It happens in book clubs, in comment sections, in safe spaces that are only safe as long as you don't question the script. You are accepted as long as you stay in character, so you do, and what's terrifying is how good you've gotten at it. You've lost your flavor, and no one noticed. Why? Because everyone around you is doing the same thing. You live in a culture of borrowed voices, a choir of echoes pretending to be individuals. The result? Depthless, hollow connection. You know everyone, and no one knows you, because there is no you left in the room, just a collage of other people's thoughts pasted on the surface of your skull. Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society, but you call it maturity when you comply, you call it wisdom when you settle, you call it kindness when you silence your truth to keep the mood stable, and slowly, your spirit gets quieter. The part of you that once wanted more, that had opinions, passions, oddities, humor that didn't land with everyone, gets boxed in, sealed off, smothered under the pressure to belong, and you don't even mourn it. You think you evolved, but really, you just dissolved. This is not a rebellion against empathy or understanding. It's a reminder that real empathy requires authenticity, that true kindness requires the courage to disagree with the room, that having a spine doesn't mean you lack heart. Your uniqueness isn't found in volume or noise. It's in discernment, in taking time to know what actually matters to you, in resisting the temptation to retweet the world and instead sit with the uncomfortable silence of an unformed opinion. Yes, silence. That's where your voice is hiding. Not the loud echo, not the forced debate, not the TikTok carousel of recycled self-help soundbites. Your true voice is under the rubble of everything you swallowed without chewing. The people you admire, the ones who magnetize others effortlessly, are rarely the ones who fit in perfectly. They're the ones who felt out of place and didn't run from it. They're the ones who chose their own mind even when it cost them belonging. They're not echoes, they're vibrations. And when you stop performing and start listening, not to others, but to the voice you've buried under trend cycles and approval addiction, you will remember who you are. Not what you perform, not what you present, but who you were before the noise. Because if you keep living like this, in agreement, in safety, in echo. You'll forget what you sound like. You'll wake up one day and feel the strange emptiness of being universally accepted and deeply unknown, even to yourself. And all the while, you'll keep filtering your life, polishing your aesthetic, curating your light, while your soul sits in the shadows, wondering when it gets to speak again. You used to laugh at people who obsessed over appearances. You thought you were above that. You believed in being real. But somewhere along the line, you got tired of feeling invisible. So you traded depth for design. You learned how to be seen, not for who you are but for how you look. You curated, not lived. You filtered your flaws, you edited your emotions. You started to care more about how your life looked than how it actually felt. You didn't even notice it at first. It starts subtly, like watering a fake plant and wondering why it doesn't grow. You bought clothes you hated, just because they looked good in a photo. You smiled with eyes that didn't mean it. You practiced authenticity in mirrors. Your vulnerability became an aesthetic, perfectly timed, emotionally resonant, and completely staged. You started calling your mess a brand, but deep down you knew it. You weren't living a life, you were crafting a character, a version of yourself. People would applaud for being real, while you slowly forgot what real even meant. You felt the disconnect growing like mold in silence. You'd get 100 likes and still feel unworthy. You'd get compliments and feel disgusted. You weren't being praised, your projection was. They didn't love you, they loved the image. And that image, it's addicting. It's addictive because it doesn't argue, it doesn't reject, it doesn't bleed, it just performs, and performance is safe. But safety kills something sacred inside you, your ability to be misunderstood, to be unfinished, to be free. What's worse, you began to measure other people the same way. You looked for vibe, not values, aesthetic, not authenticity. You judged someone's worth by their curation skills. You stopped listening to what people say and focused on how they look when they say it. You made the external a moral compass. If someone looked healed, you believed them. If someone looked messy, you dismissed them. And just like that, you built a world where beauty had more authority than honesty. This isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a cultural one, a silent collective agreement to fake it, and never talk about how much it costs. You see it everywhere now. People who dress like they know who they are, but don't. People who live their truth, but only when it's retweetable. People who call it a journey, but really it's a photo shoot. You start to feel haunted, not by ghosts, but by all the versions of yourself you abandoned to be liked. You want to feel again, but the numbness is easier. It keeps the image clean. You want to care, but caring means risk. It means someone might actually see you, and not like what they see. So you stick to your costume. You tell yourself, this is just life now. Everyone's doing it. And you're right, most people are doing it. Most people are quietly grieving the loss of their inner world while posting about sunsets and self-love. But something in you, maybe it's buried deep under the filters and fatigue, remembers. It remembers what it felt like to create without an audience, to speak without rehearsing, to move without checking how you looked doing it. And it aches for that version of you, not perfect, not polished, but real, and maybe, just maybe, you want to start listening to that ache. Because here's the hard truth, you can't manifest a life that's only surface. The universe doesn't respond to what you perform, it responds to what you believe. You can script affirmations and speak abundance and still feel hollow, because your manifestations are wearing makeup. You're trying to attract joy while hiding your sadness. You're trying to call in alignment while living out of fear. That's not manifestation, that's pretending with glitter. Manifestation begins when the mask drops, when the image breaks, when you're finally honest about the fact that your curated reality is making you sick. When you sit in your mess and stay, no hashtags, no healing rituals, just raw, unshaped honesty. That's where the magic starts. In the ugly, in the silent, in the deeply unshareable moments of realness. So if you've forgotten who you are, because the performance got too loud, you're not alone. But you do have to choose. You can either keep watering the fake plant and calling it growth, or you can pull the whole thing out by the roots. Yes, it'll be uncomfortable. Yes, you'll lose some of the claps, but in return, you'll get something sacred back. You say yes when you mean maybe, or worse, when you mean no. You do it with a smile, a soft tone, maybe even a little laugh to cushion it. You don't want to be difficult. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to explain why your gut tenses at the thought of agreeing, so you betray it instead. And the betrayal doesn't feel like a knife. It feels like guilt, like something that's somehow your fault. You weren't assertive enough. You weren't clear enough. You weren't kind enough. So next time, you try to say yes faster, cleaner, with less hesitation. Because what's worse than guilt? Rejection. But every yes you say from the wrong place, that's another thread tied around your spine, tugging you into someone else's story. It starts small. You say yes to dinner when you need rest. Yes to a project that drains you. Yes to silence when you should have spoken. And with every sure and okay, and I guess you vanish just a little bit more. Not dramatically, just enough to feel like the version of you in the mirror gets fuzzier over time. Your life doesn't feel like it's yours. And yet, when asked, you'll say it's fine. That's the thing. We convince ourselves that people-pleasing is generosity. That accommodating everyone is maturity. That swallowing discomfort is grace. But most of the time, it's just fear, with manners. And fear makes you obedient. It makes you agreeable. It makes you shapeless. You start manifesting a version of life that isn't yours, because all of your thoughts are filtered through the need to be liked, to be safe, to be wanted. So the version of success you think you want, that's not yours. That's a collage of what others applauded. The partner you think you're manifesting, that's not desire. That's the image that gets the most likes. The goals on your vision board, half of them are rooted in insecurity, not inspiration. You begin to mistake politeness for alignment. You see the universe as this benevolent waiter that will just hand you whatever you softly nod toward, even if deep down you're screaming something else. But manifestation doesn't respond to the words you say, it responds to your state, your truth, your nervous system, your frequency. If your yes vibrates with resentment, confusion, or fear, the universe doesn't hear your words, it hears your contraction, and it mirrors it back. When you say yes to misaligned paths, you're broadcasting, I don't believe I have the right to live fully as myself. So guess what comes back? More people, situations and timelines that force you to compromise, that test your boundaries, that exploit your silence. It's not punishment, it's reflection. You're co-creating with the belief that your truth is a liability. The scariest part. You become excellent at this. You become fluent in self-abandonment. You read people's emotions before they speak. You predict what will please them. You pre-edit your personality before entering a room, and they love you for it. They love the version of you that's been manicured for their comfort. But it's not love if it doesn't meet the real you. It's performance appreciation. And you can't cry later about being misunderstood when you've spent years handing everyone a script with lines you never wanted to say. But here's the thing, you've forgotten. Your no is sacred. It is a spell. It creates space. It tells the universe, I trust that better is on the way. It breaks patterns. It stuns people used to your compliance. It creates discomfort. Yes, but growth doesn't come from comfort, and alignment doesn't come from nodding. It comes from stopping. There's a quiet power in honoring your maybe, sitting with it, asking what it's trying to tell you. Sometimes that hesitation is intuition, a red flag, a deeper desire. Sometimes it's just fear, and even that deserves your presence, because at least fear is honest. Way more honest than the cheerful yes you say to keep the peace while your soul itches. And if you think that saying no will cost you relationships, opportunities, or reputation, good. Let it. Anything that crumbles because you started being real wasn't stable anyway. You don't need applause. You need resonance. You need mirrors, not spotlights. You need spaces that invite your truth, not punish it. The next step in reclaiming your voice isn't screaming. It's pausing. It's hearing the silence in yourself and respecting what it's trying to say. That pause becomes your compass. Not every decision needs a reaction. Not every offer deserves your time, and not every presence is a blessing. Eventually you'll notice something beautiful, that your no didn't destroy you. That saying maybe saved your time. That choosing discomfort over people-pleasing gave birth to a version of you you actually like. One that's quiet, sure, and whole. You stop craving validation from people who only ever knew the performance. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for protecting your energy. Because suddenly there's clarity, not just in your words but in your presence. And the best part, the world adjusts. Slowly, you attract different conversations, different timelines, ones that don't require sacrifice, just honesty. You finally stop shape-shifting. You walk into a room and take up space, not by force, but by truth. And in that truth, you stop begging for a life that matches your worth. You begin building one. You used to be curious. You used to ask weird questions, wear weird clothes, make weird faces in the mirror, just to see what your face could do. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just being that oddball energy, that strange little spark, that thing that made you sit alone in the dirt, or sing off-key in the shower, or obsess over obscure facts about frogs or planets, or fonts. That was you, before you started managing yourself for approval, before you learned to make your personality digestible. Now, you're palatable, you're safe, you wear the right things, you say the right things, you have soft opinions, and market-friendly dreams. You think you're expressing yourself, but what you're really doing is censoring your originality, so it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. You call it maturity, you call it growth, you call it being professional, or being socially aware, but deep down you know, it's fear. Fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, fear of being too much. You've buried your weirdness so deeply that even you forget it was ever there, and the scariest part, the world wants you to forget. Society rewards conformity. It praises the people who color inside the lines, who follow instructions, who look like they were printed by the same 3D personality printer everyone else went through. You're not celebrated for your quirks, you're celebrated for how well you fit, for how easy you are to like. And every time you get that little nod of approval, a little more of your real self dies. But here's the worst part, you'll start to think this is normal. You'll start to believe that people who talk too loudly, or laugh too much, or believe things that don't make sense, are just immature or unrefined. That people who still have wonder in their eyes are naive. That those who cry easily are weak, and those who speak boldly are arrogant. You'll roll your eyes at dreamers. You'll scoff at passion. You'll become the thing that once made you shrink, and then you'll wonder why you feel numb, why life feels small, why nothing really excites you anymore. It's because you traded fire for filters. You traded the weird, wonderful spark of your soul for something sterile and acceptable. You don't create anymore, you copy. You don't risk, you rehearse. You don't live, you perform. But let's be honest, weirdness isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it makes people leave. Sometimes it makes you question your sanity, but it's alive, it's real, it's unpredictable, and that's what makes it magic. The parts of you that don't fit are not flaws, they are your fingerprints. They are the little rebellions of your spirit against mass-produced humanity. If you want your personality back, you have to stop asking if it's okay to be who you are. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, to be laughed at, to be told you're too much. Because the people who spark change in this world, the people who make art, move hearts, build movements, they're always too much, for the ones who settled too early. You don't reclaim your uniqueness by journaling about it, or setting an intention or writing it on your vision board. You reclaim it in the moment you choose truth over approval, when you speak up instead of swallowing your thoughts, when you dance badly in public because the music feels good, when you let your voice crack during a story that matters to you, when you stop editing your soul like a resume and let it breathe. The world doesn't need more curated personalities. It doesn't need more productivity hacks or aesthetic reels or passive-aggressive self-care quotes. It needs real humans. Glorious, unfiltered, contradictory, chaotic humans who are brave enough to live as themselves, not as their branding. And yes, people will leave. People will call you difficult. You will lose fake friendships, shallow lovers, maybe even your old job. But you'll gain something else. You'll gain the full spectrum, ridiculous, radiant version of yourself that doesn't need applause to be alive. And once you taste that kind of freedom, once you stop negotiating your personality like a publicist, you'll never go back to being ordinary. You'll realize it was never about becoming someone else. It was always about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And when you remember that, you start to see how much of the rest of your life, your habits, your goals, your attention, was designed around staying small, around staying safe, around staying invisible. And you start to feel the urge to throw it all off, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. Because what's the point of building a life where you can't even recognize yourself? You begin to notice something else too. All those people you admired, the ones who seemed free and alive and magnetic, they weren't perfect. They were just unapologetically themselves. They never killed their weird. They led with it. And if you're still breathing, it's not too late. Weirdness isn't gone. It's just sleeping, waiting for you to stop apologizing and start living again. Now ask yourself, who did you have to betray to become so acceptable? And more importantly, are you done pretending yet? You used to be curious. You used to wonder, dig holes into weird questions that didn't have immediate answers. But now, you just scroll, because everything's already been asked and answered by someone prettier, smarter, louder, faster, and you've outsourced wonder for convenience. You weren't even trying to ruin your personality. It just happened, quietly, while you were too stimulated to notice. You wake up, and before your feet hit the floor, you're hit by light, your phone, your feed, your curated chaos. You scroll through perfect mornings, funny trauma jokes, trends that give you a script for how to feel. And in that second, before you've even decided who you are that day, you've been given 100 identities to wear, all of them borrowed, all of them safe. That's how your uniqueness dies now, not with a dramatic betrayal, but with passive exposure, over and over, death by 1,000 suggestions. But you wouldn't call it death, would you? You'd call it inspiration. I'm just staying updated. I like seeing what's out there. Sure, that's what you tell yourself as you double tap yourself into numbness. You're not engaging, you're absorbing. And you're absorbing more than you think. You're absorbing how to walk, how to think, how to speak in 15-second captions, how to present pain attractively, how to complain fashionably, how to perform ambition without ever building it from scratch. It's not that the phone is evil, the internet isn't plotting to erase your identity, but here's the brutal truth. If you don't consciously design the inputs of your mind, they will be designed for you, and they already are. Algorithms don't want you to be deep, they want you to be engaged. You're not a personality to them, you're a pattern to exploit. And most people are okay with that. Because thinking is hard, because silence is scary, because staring at the wall for 5 minutes might accidentally reveal that you don't like who you're becoming. So instead of sitting with that discomfort, you pick up the phone and scroll into another version of yourself that doesn't have to feel it, and slowly, quietly, your attention becomes property, not sacred, not private, not yours. Your attention is currency, and you're bankrupting your inner life to pay for temporary stimulation. You don't even know when the last time was that you were truly bored, in that raw, itchy, creative kind of boredom, the kind that leads you to write bad poetry, or talk to a stranger, or stare at a leaf for too long, the kind that makes you curious. And in losing that boredom, you've lost your originality, because you cannot create, you cannot manifest anything real, from overstimulation. Manifestation isn't about vision boards or vibes. Real manifestation is the art of bringing the intangible to life, your thoughts, your instincts, your chaos, your patterns, and turning them into something tangible through intention. But if you are constantly filling your mind with other people's thoughts, other people's voices, other people's dreams, then how will yours ever have space to land? You cannot manifest from a crowded mind. You cannot hear your intuition through noise. The dangerous lie we've been sold is that inspiration is endless online. But it's not inspiration. It's repetition in disguise. The more you consume, the more you align with a collective narrative, and manifestation isn't collective, it's personal, it's raw, it's messy, it's often embarrassing, it requires you to actually be seen in your clumsy beginnings, but you're too afraid of looking dumb, so you just mimic confidence instead of cultivating it. You want to manifest a version of you that's magnetic and grounded and original, but your current behaviors are rooted in mimicry, not mindfulness. To actually manifest the unique version of yourself that you keep daydreaming about, you need to uninstall other people's desires. You need to detox from aesthetics that don't belong to you. You need to stop microdosing everyone else's life until yours feels like background noise. Turn the volume down, sit with yourself in the dead silence of non-distraction. You will not like it at first. You will itch to check. You will want a hit of chaos, a flash of novelty. Don't take it. Let your boredom ferment. Let it spoil your comfort. That's where real originality grows, in that compost pile of emptiness. Because here's the secret, no one tells you, when you finally stop performing interest in everything, you'll rediscover the strange specific things that only you love. Maybe it's ants, maybe it's 80s, Tamil disco, maybe it's abandoned architecture, or dead languages, or making tiny paper shoes, who knows, but it'll be yours, and that's what a personality is, not a brand, not a performance, but a quiet devotion to your own strangeness. And when that happens, when you begin to feel your own mind again, you'll also begin to feel the next crime creeping in. The need to protect comfort, the illusion that avoiding risk is the same as being safe, and that's when you'll realize that safety has become your personality too. That you've been choosing smallness, because it's easier than growth. That's where we go next. You call it self-care. But let's be honest, it's just avoidance. You're not recharging, you're escaping. And the worst part? You've convinced yourself it's healing, that your comfort zone is some kind of sacred space when really, it's become a padded prison. Every time something feels difficult or unpleasant, you rush to retreat. You light a candle, put on a face mask, say you're holding space for yourself, and somehow in all of that softness, you never quite face the thing that's tearing you apart. Manifestation culture made this worse. It told you that you only have to think your way to healing, to success, to peace, that all discomfort is resistance, that anything hard is out of alignment. So you stopped pushing, stopped struggling, stopped trying. You started calling laziness intuition. You labeled every challenge as a red flag from the universe, and you decided the universe owed you something for just existing. That's not healing, that's hiding. You convinced yourself that the hard things, the workouts, the awkward conversations, the late nights of effort, the terrifying leaps into the unknown, were somehow less spiritual, because they made you sweat and cry. So instead of manifesting strength, you manifested stagnation. You whispered affirmations into the mirror while your soul begged for action. You called your fear a sign. You avoided the gym because your energy didn't align. You skipped the interview prep because what's meant for me won't miss me. And all the while, life did miss you, because you never showed up. You know what's wild? The version of you that wants everything. The life, the love, the art, the peace. She's on the other side of discipline. The kind of discipline that looks boring on camera. The kind that doesn't go viral. The kind that makes you close TikTok, wake up at 6 a.m., finish that ugly first draft, eat the bland protein, and speak up even when your voice shakes. That's the kind of magic that actually builds lives. But you don't want magic, you want miracles. You want the universe to deliver without you moving. You want the dream body, but not the sore muscles. You want the soulmate, but not the vulnerability. You want the business, but not the risk. You want transformation without the breakdown. You want all the rewards of rebirth, without the death of the old self. And let's be honest, you've stopped manifesting with intention, and started manifesting with entitlement. You talk to the universe like it's Amazon Prime, like you can just click visualize and track your order through angel numbers. But nothing's arriving, because you're not moving. You're not showing up in faith. You're hiding in fear, and calling it alignment. Look, rest is important. Reflection is sacred. But don't confuse pause with paralysis. Don't confuse comfort with growth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop babying your wounds and start training your muscles. Sometimes self-care is dragging yourself out of bed when it's the last thing you want to do. Sometimes love feels like discipline. The people who get what they want aren't more spiritual, they're more consistent. They wake up tired, they show up unready, they take the leap even when they're shaking. And here's the part no one tells you: they manifest faster, because they act faster. They don't wait for the mood, they don't wait for clarity, they don't wait to feel healed enough. They move first, and clarity comes later, confidence comes later, readiness comes later. But momentum only comes to the ones already in motion. You've been stuck in getting ready mode for years. You've been vision boarding instead of living. You've been writing lists instead of taking steps. You've been trying to vibrate higher, while your reality rots beneath you. But energy flows where action goes. If you want magic, you have to give the universe somewhere to land. And right now, you've given it nothing but wishes. What if instead of trying to protect your peace, you let it be disturbed a little? What if discomfort wasn't a sign of danger, but a signal of growth? What if all the chaos you've been avoiding is actually your cocoon, the dark, uncomfortable, messy place where you stop being small? Because here's the truth. You're not meant to just sit in the glow of incense and intentions. You're meant to rise, to move, to break the spell of numbness you cast on yourself in the name of healing. You're meant to act like someone who believes, not just think like her, and definitely not wait to feel like her. So maybe it's time to admit it. Your self-care became your self-sabotage. You wrapped your fear in rituals and told yourself it was enough, but it's not anymore. And now you get to change. Now you get to earn your peace by building it. And if that peace breaks some comfort along the way, good, because comfort never made anyone powerful. Power comes from movement, from ownership, from facing the mirror and deciding you're done escaping, that you will not use alignment as an excuse to be invisible anymore, because up ahead, just beyond the resistance, is the part of you that no longer needs to be rescued, the part that doesn't chase ease, the part that doesn't beg the universe for softness. She's not delicate, she's deliberate, and she's waiting for you to catch up. You talk about healing. You post quotes about it. You sprinkle healing era in your captions like it's a season on Netflix. People nod, react, share, and say same. And for a while it feels like you're actually doing something about your pain. But here's the twist. You don't want to admit you're not healing. You're performing it. You've mastered the art of talking about wounds instead of cleaning them. You've learned to narrate your suffering instead of outgrowing it. Because deep down facing it, really facing it, isn't Instagrammable, it's not aesthetic, it's not romantic, it's lonely, it's ugly, and it doesn't get likes. Real healing doesn't come with a Spotify playlist and candles. It comes with sitting in silence with your worst memory until it stops screaming. But most people would rather look healed than actually be healed. And that's where the rot begins. You've layered so many quotes and terms on your pain that it stopped being pain and became a brand. I have abandonment issues, you say. But then you use that label like an excuse, a shield, a personality trait, never as a reason to get better. Healing has become this slow, soft lie we tell ourselves to avoid the sharp truth. You're not growing just because you've read the words inner child 10 times this week. You're not recovering just because you lit incense and wrote, I release all that no longer serves me in your journal. That's all surface. It's ceremony. And while it might bring comfort, it doesn't cut deep enough to change anything. The actual change happens where no one claps for you. No one even sees you. You ruin your uniqueness when you start cosplaying growth. You forget that healing isn't about appearing wise. It's about confronting your most shameful patterns quietly, alone, repeatedly. The world taught you to broadcast pain and call it transparency. So you did. You made it poetic. You made it digestible. But healing isn't soft poetry. It's brutal. It means unlearning everything that made you feel safe. It means calling yourself out at 3 a.m. for the way you manipulate people to avoid being abandoned. It means choosing uncomfortable conversations over ghosting, choosing accountability over pity, choosing change over a curated identity. Somewhere along the line we started rewarding awareness more than growth, as if being able to describe your issues is the same as resolving them. I push people away, you admit with a laugh, as if awareness absolves you. It doesn't. It just spotlights the gap between what you know and what you're willing to do. And that gap is where authenticity dies. That's where your personality becomes a collage of half-healed wounds and well-practiced hashtags. If you want to ruin your personality, here's how: talk endlessly about healing, but never apologize to the people you hurt. Learn all the words but none of the actions. Get addicted to sharing your sadness, but allergic to changing your patterns. That's how you become a hollow echo of who you could have been. And the saddest part? You start mistaking emotional fluency for emotional maturity. Just because you can label your trauma doesn't mean you've grown past it. Trauma isn't a tattoo. It's not meant to be permanent. It's not a flex. It's a wound, and wounds are supposed to close. But you keep yours open. You dress it up. You make it look interesting. Because healing for you has become a means to stay relevant in a world that rewards rawness more than resolution. Let this offend you. Let it punch your ego. Because maybe you need that. Maybe your soul is begging for discomfort. Something real, something sharp enough to wake you up. Healing isn't something you say you're doing. It's something that makes you lose people, makes you lose patterns, makes you unrecognizable even to yourself. Pulse. And if you've read this far thinking, this isn't me, maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly you. Maybe your need to deny this is proof that you've settled for the performance, not the process. But there's something terrifyingly beautiful waiting on the other side of your curated chaos. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. And clarity changes everything. It makes you stop dressing your pain. Stop naming it. Stop feeding it with attention. It makes you do the hard thing, the quiet thing, the honest thing. And soon, without even realizing, you stop announcing your growth. You start living it. And that's when you take your personality back from the hashtags, from the trauma, from the followers. You stop being a brand of brokenness. You become a person again. And now the next challenge sneaks in quietly, in the silence after healing. What if you stop chasing the next thing to fix, and just sit with the stillness you've been avoiding your whole life? You used to create for joy. Now you post for applause. The dopamine hit of a like has replaced the thrill of making something that felt like you. You used to write weird poems no one understood, hum tunes in your room that no one heard, paint messily, talk to yourself in voices, imagine entire worlds in silence. But now, every impulse is pre-filtered. Every spark is stalled by the question, will this perform? The moment creation became performance, something quietly withered. You don't speak until the sentence is perfectly quotable. You don't post unless it fits your grid. You don't move unless someone's watching. You've built a personality in high resolution, but it's hollow. High definition, low definition you. That's the tragic part. It's not that you've become fake, no, that would have been easier to fix. It's that your sense of real is now co-authored by strangers. You still feel authentic, but that authenticity is shaped by invisible judges. You ask yourself what to share, not based on meaning, but on metrics. The algorithm is your diary. The audience is your mirror. This wasn't a conscious decision. No one wakes up and says, "Today, I will outsource my soul." It's 1,000 micro decisions. I won't post this. It's too messy. Let me delete that. It didn't get traction. I should redo this in a trendier way. You slowly begin to amputate the parts of yourself that don't perform well, and eventually what's left is a safe, lovable, hollow shell. But here's the insidious part. Validation feels like purpose. It feels like love. It feels like progress. You hit a milestone. People clap. You go viral. You feel proud. The world tells you you're something special, and for a second, you believe them. But that belief fades fast, and you're left chasing the next applause, like a stage actor who forgot how to live without an audience. So now you've learned to manifest your life through the eyes of others. You don't imagine what you want. You imagine what would look impressive. You don't dream privately. You storyboard it in carousels and captions. You're not manifesting from selfhood. You're manifesting from emptiness that looks put together. A brand, a lifestyle, a carefully arranged lie. Let's call it what it is. Clout addiction disguised as ambition. The world rewards visibility, not depth, and you unfortunately believed them. You thought being seen was the same as being known, but here's the haunting truth. The more you're consumed, the less of you remains. You became digestible, so people could swallow you whole. And now you wonder why you feel invisible, in a room full of followers, but you still want to feel real again. You still crave something unsellable, and that's where the rescue starts. You take your joy back by creating things no one ever sees. You write words and delete them. You hum songs no one hears. You create not because it's profitable, but because it's proof that you exist beyond performance, that you are not a product, that your worth isn't tied to whether others find you entertaining. Let your art be ugly. Let your thoughts be unmarketable. Let your process be hidden. Build altars in private to the things that make your soul stir, and watch your authenticity rebuild itself, slowly, quietly, on its own terms. Because you cannot manifest a life that feels alive while filtering every moment through the lens of desirability. You can't build joy with borrowed metrics. And you can't become whole while performing fracture. When you stop performing, you start hearing. Your voice returns in whispers. Your instincts return in shivers. You feel stupid, then you feel honest, then you feel free. And just when you think you've reclaimed yourself, you'll meet the next demon: silence, the blank page, the space where no one's watching. And in that moment, you'll have a choice: perform again, or sit with the discomfort of being unseen. Most won't make it past that moment, but if you do, if you stay, you'll notice something miraculous. You'll begin to think differently, not in recycled language, not in trending concepts, but in raw, real, inconvenient thoughts. Thoughts that embarrass you, ideas that don't fit your aesthetic, desires that scare you because they're yours, and no one else's. And that's where we go next. Because the worst part isn't that you lost your voice, it's that you became afraid of hearing it. Let's fix that. You're always fine, you're blessed, you're grateful. It's your default answer to anything that feels too real to admit. You've learned to dress your wounds in pretty language, to wrap your disappointments in metaphors of fate, and to armor your loneliness with phrases stolen from Pinterest and wellness influencers. You smile like everything's aligned, even when everything inside you feels misaligned, cracked, hollow. It's not that you're lying exactly, It's just that you've perfected the art of saying the right things, the beautiful things, while avoiding the actual things. It started small. Maybe it was in moments where you felt disappointed, and someone told you to just be grateful. So you were, or you tried to be. You twisted your truth into a presentable package, because real pain was messy, real emotions made people uncomfortable. You wanted to be the kind of person who handled things with grace, who didn't overreact, who saw the lesson in every failure before she even had time to mourn it. You didn't realize you were robbing yourself of the truth. You became fluent in spiritual bypassing, the act of skipping over your human experience in favor of poetic illusions that looked mature but actually reeked of repression. And the worst part, people praise you for it. They say you're wise, they say you're strong, they say you're so evolved, because in a world terrified of depth, pretending to be healed gets more applause than actually doing the work. You're rewarded for hiding your struggle, not revealing it. You post your affirmations like shields, you record your rituals like trophies. Meanwhile, your silence grows deeper, your sadness gets lonelier, and your personality, it fades into the background of whatever image you're curating today. This isn't about being fake. You're not fake. You're exhausted. You're afraid. You're trying to survive in a culture where everyone is performing, and the performance is called self-love, where vulnerability is scripted, and healing is branded, where I'm doing better is often a cover-up for I'm afraid to tell you how bad it really is. Somewhere along the way, authenticity became an aesthetic instead of a practice. You don't share your confusion anymore. You only share the clarity that came months later, after it's polished, digestible, and safe to consume. But here's the truth that grates against everything you've been taught. Honesty is rebellion. Honesty, the ugly, uncaptioned, unfiltered kind, is how you reclaim the parts of you that got buried under self-improvement content. Saying I don't know, I'm jealous, I'm still hurt, or I don't feel grateful today, might not be pretty, but it's real, and real is rare. Rare is sacred. Rare is what your unique personality used to be, before it was shaved down to something pleasant and palatable. You don't owe the world your prettiest self. You owe it your truest one. You don't need to inspire people with your endless optimism while you quietly fall apart. You don't need to say I'm fine when your whole body is screaming otherwise. Emotions aren't dirty. They aren't weak. They aren't shameful. They are signals, and when you ignore them long enough you lose the ability to recognize yourself in the mirror. You become a brand instead of a being, and maybe if you're honest with yourself, that's already happened. You've learned to wear masks that even you forgot were masks. You say the things that sound wise without asking whether they're true for you. You confuse eloquence with healing, but healing doesn't always sound profound. Sometimes it's raw, sometimes it's embarrassing. Sometimes it's nothing more than sitting with the ache and refusing to narrate it like a podcast monologue. Sometimes it's just surviving without pretending that you're thriving. You don't have to perform wholeness. Wholeness doesn't look like perfection. It looks like contradiction, like holding grief and joy in the same breath, like admitting you feel lost even when you know where you are, like accepting that being grateful and being angry can coexist. Real healing isn't graceful. It's honest. It's lonely. It's inconsistent. And it's yours. But it's easy to hide inside the language of healing, to intellectualize your sadness, to narrate your trauma with just enough detachment that you feel above it. You speak about your pain like it happened to someone else. You write about your heartbreaks with poetic flair, and for a moment, that feels like control. But healing isn't control, and self-awareness isn't the finish line. It's only the first crack in the surface of self-deception. Knowing your patterns doesn't change them. You can name every attachment style, every trauma response, every inner child wound. But if you're still weaponizing that knowledge to justify bad behavior, you're just building a smarter cage. Insight without action is masturbation. It might feel satisfying, but it doesn't move you anywhere. It doesn't liberate the parts of you that are still hiding behind language, hoping no one asks how you really feel. And maybe this is where you pause. Maybe this is where you stop performing wellness and start feeling again. Let your answers be messy. Let your voice shake. Let your truth offend. Let your personality be unfiltered, not just authentic trademark, because the next trap is near. It's where you start thinking all this reflection means you've evolved. But if evolution was real, you wouldn't still be waiting to speak. You wouldn't still be asking for permission to feel. You wouldn't still be building a house out of Instagram quotes and calling it a home. The real work is quieter than that, less glamorous, more inconvenient. It looks like shutting up when you want to defend yourself, owning your envy, saying I don't know how to be happy for them right now. That's ugly truth. That's growth. That's what burns off the layers you never meant to wear in the first place. And if you've made it here, maybe you're finally ready to disappoint people, ready to be misunderstood, ready to feel, without the perfect language to explain it. Because that's the threshold between who you've been and who you're becoming, and the only thing that stands in the way is the performance. Let it fall. You've spent years learning to smile when things are wrong, to post polished thoughts, and to rehearse your trauma until it's palatable. So naturally, the next step is this. Treat thinking like it's dangerous. Let the world spoon-feed you what to believe, because it's safer that way, cleaner. You don't ask questions, not really. You adopt pre-approved stances. You avoid tension. You stay in your lane. You're not actually stupid. You've just been taught that asking why is impolite, so you don't. You let thoughts pass over you like clouds, never letting any of them storm long enough to change the weather inside. You've turned thinking into a risk, not because it's risky, but because of what it might cost you. If you start to question everything you've absorbed from school, your parents, your religion, your favorite productivity podcast, you might actually change. And change is terrifying when your whole personality is curated around being agreeable, digestible, and socially intelligent. So instead, you hide behind mantras like, I don't overthink anymore, or I just vibe now. It sounds peaceful. It's not. It's mental sedation dressed as spirituality. You're not enlightened. You're just bored and numb. The real reason you've stopped thinking deeply is because deep thought doesn't always produce immediate results. It doesn't give you a 6-step morning routine or an instant mood boost. It gives you discomfort. It gives you cognitive dissonance. It forces you to face contradictions in your own worldview, and that's the part nobody wants to deal with. So instead of reflection, you manifest. Yes, now you're into manifestation, but not the kind that comes from quiet, brave alignment. No, you've turned it into consumer magic. Your affirmations are affirming your denial. You chant that you're abundant while actively avoiding the root of your scarcity. You visualize peace, but never face the war raging in your psyche. You say the universe is aligning, but you're still the same person, making the same choices, repeating the same week every Monday. This isn't belief. This is spiritual bypassing. Manifestation should be born from thought, not in place of it. It should be the second step, not the only one. But you've decided you're too high vibe to think critically. You reject skepticism as negativity, even when it's your inner compass screaming that something isn't right. You say everything happens for a reason to escape accountability. You call it fate when it's fear. You call it divine timing when it's procrastination. That's not alignment. That's spiritualized laziness. And the irony, your mind, the one you keep silencing with quotes and crystals, is the exact tool you need to build the life you're pretending to attract. But of course, thinking has a cost. It alienates you. It makes you harder to manipulate. It might make you walk away from communities, relationships, even entire belief systems, and maybe you're not ready for that. So instead, you stay asleep with your eyes open, scrolling affirmations that never challenge you. If you truly want to manifest something powerful, try manifesting discomfort, manifest courage, manifest the ability to sit with a thought that disturbs you, without labeling it as low vibration. You're not growing if you're always comfortable. You're just decorating your prison cell. You want truth. It's not cozy. It doesn't come with aesthetic Pinterest boards or warm bathwater quotes. It comes like fire. It burns the version of you that thought fitting in was more important than waking up. Thinking, deep, ugly, unmarketable thinking, is the spark that makes real manifestation possible. Not just for wealth, but for identity, for purpose, for you. Which leads us to the next tragic trend in your downfall, your addiction to avoiding boredom. You've confused chaos with aliveness. You want stimulation, not meaning. You avoid stillness because it might introduce you to yourself, and you're scared of that meeting. So you run into scrolling, into noise, into other people's opinions, into pre-chewed thoughts from influencers who never even lived the life they preach. But if you could just stop, really stop, and let the silence swallow you, you'd hear the parts of yourself that have been whispering under the static. You'd hear the ideas trying to be born, the truths you already knew, but were too afraid to name. But you won't get that revelation on a vision board. You get it by thinking your way out of the maze you were born into, one uncomfortable revolutionary thought at a time. Boredom creates ideas, but you avoid it like disease. So you stay distracted and bland, You reach for your phone before your mind can wander. You skip silence like it's radioactive. You run from stillness as if it might swallow you, because somewhere along the line, someone convinced you that being entertained is the same as being alive. It's not. When was the last time you sat in nothing? Not multitasking, not scrolling, not plotting the next productivity hack or spiritual high, just sitting. Not because you were told to meditate, but because you were curious, because you wondered what your mind might dig up when it wasn't being fed. There's a lie in modern life so slippery, it feels like a fact that being busy is a virtue, and being bored is a flaw. But boredom, true, gnawing, spacious boredom, is not a flaw, it's a crucible. It's the uncomfortable space where your mind finally begins to stretch, reach, and create. When you were a child, boredom was the doorway to invention. You didn't scroll, you explored. You didn't consume, you imagined. But now as an adult, you reject that same discomfort with urgency. The moment boredom approaches, you reach for noise, music, YouTube, another short. You claim you're relaxing, but you're actually avoiding your mind like it's an enemy. You've trained yourself to flinch at your own thoughts. But here's the thing, the people you admire, the inventors, the artists, the thinkers, they didn't escape boredom, they befriended it. They sat in the desert of silence long enough to hear the whispers no one else had patience for. Every original idea you've ever seen, read, or loved, was born in a space where nothing else was happening. That space you avoid, that silence you treat like death. You can't manifest a life of originality while hiding in imitation. You can't ask the universe for creativity while refusing the emptiness it needs to grow something new. Manifestation isn't about begging the universe with a Pinterest board. It's about preparing the soil of your mind to receive something that doesn't exist yet. And that soil, it needs stillness. Boredom is not a threat to manifestation, it's the seedbed. But most people today don't manifest. They copy, they don't vision, they recycle, they light candles, chant affirmations, visualize luxury, but never let themselves be bored enough to discover what they truly desire. You don't manifest by speaking what's popular. You manifest by listening to what's buried inside you, and that voice only speaks when things get quiet. Avoiding boredom is like refusing to meet your muse. She won't scream over your Spotify playlist. She won't DM you during a 10-second reel. She waits in the dry, silent parts of your day, when you've stopped performing and started being. That's when she whispers the blueprint for something entirely yours. You want a unique personality, but you run from the unique experiences that create one. You crave depth, but you binge distraction like it's your job. And then you wonder why everything feels plastic, why your dreams feel copy-pasted, why your identity feels performative. It's because you've replaced soul-searching with soul-scrolling, and you can't download depth. So here's the hard truth, whispered with love. If your life feels shallow, if your dreams feel dull, if your sense of self feels edited, it's because you're skipping boredom, you're denying silence, you're numbing the exact parts of your mind that would have introduced you to yourself. Start small, sit without reaching, walk without earbuds, let your eyes stare at something for no reason, let your hands stay still, let your brain itch, and wait. Watch what arises when you stop grabbing. That discomfort, that's not emptiness, that's potential, and it builds, slowly, strangely, stubbornly. At first the thoughts will feel random, cringy, pointless. Then, an image, a line, a question, a vision, a truth you didn't know you had. That's the manifestation, that's the download, that's where the shift begins. Because here's the miracle that boredom brings. It empties you just enough for something real to arrive, and most people miss it. They miss it every day, every time they choose noise over presence. And by doing so, they slowly become unoriginal, uninspired, unseen, not by the world but by themselves. Which leads us to something even more tragic. What happens when you've ignored boredom so long, you forget you ever had a self to return to? Because yes, you can ruin your unique personality, you can drown it in entertainment, you can oversaturate it with content, you can desensitize your intuition until it sounds like static, and then you'll be left with a curated shell of yourself, pleasant to look at, but hollow to live in. But if you sit in boredom long enough, if you stop running and start listening, something unexpected happens. You remember, and from that memory, something rebellious takes root, a craving for meaning, for creation, for depth. You stop caring how you look, and you start caring how you exist. You stop copying, and start crafting, and without trying to, you begin becoming again. You're not living your dream. You're auditioning for their love. again, and it hurts more than you're willing to admit, because it looks like success. It looks like being a good child. It looks like obedience and pride and family legacy. But deep inside, you know it's not yours. The job, the degree, the relationship, the way you smile at weddings, they're all pieces of a costume sewn from someone else's fabric. You were handed a script before you could even read, and you've been reciting your lines like a pro ever since. You perform well, too well, because you're afraid that if you drop the act, the applause might stop. It begins so subtly, a "what will people think" here, a "make your father proud" there. Suddenly, your curiosity becomes shameful, your desires become selfish, your individuality gets sanded down into something that fits neatly in the family photo. You don't explore what you want, you're too busy translating your parents' dreams into your actions. The tragedy is that you don't even realize it. You believe you're choosing, but you're not. You're surviving. Somewhere, a long time ago, love got linked to performance. You learned that being lovable meant being impressive, being useful, being easy to explain at dinner parties. So now, you don't disappoint. You pick the stable career, you date the nice person. You act grateful when you're suffocating. You fear failure, not because failure is bad, but because they might stop loving you if you fall. And then you wonder why everything feels flat. Why joy feels like a borrowed outfit. Why, in moments of silence, a tiny voice inside whispers, "This isn't it." That's not your intuition malfunctioning. That's your truth, trying to crawl out of the coffin you buried it in. But the hard part, you've gotten good at pretending. You can fool your friends, even yourself. You say things like "I'm lucky," and "it's not that bad," and "other people have it worse," to quiet the rebellion inside you. You spiritualize your suppression. You call it gratitude, responsibility, duty. But here's the truth. Obedience isn't love. It's fear with a nice haircut. And you were not born to be a placeholder in someone else's fantasy. You owe them respect. Sure, you owe them gratitude. Maybe, but you don't owe them your soul, because your parents are human too. They project their unlived dreams, their unresolved wounds, their broken timelines onto you. Not because they're evil, but because no one ever let them break free either. The pressure you feel, it's generational weight. Inherited, not chosen. But here's the wild thing. The moment you decide to stop being their mirror, you become their legacy in the most honest way possible. Not by becoming what they wanted, but by becoming someone free. You don't heal your bloodline by sacrificing your joy. You heal it by showing that joy is allowed. That dreaming out loud is not rebellion, it's resurrection. But this kind of freedom comes with guilt. The first time you say no, you'll shake. The first time you tell them you're choosing differently, you'll feel like a traitor, because guilt is the first language of the untrained heart. It confuses growth with disloyalty, so don't be surprised when it feels ugly at first. When loving yourself feels like betrayal, when peace feels like abandonment. That's just your nervous system recalibrating, after years of pretending. And yes, they might not understand, they might lash out, they might say things that make you question everything again, because when you grow, you highlight where others haven't. And that's threatening, not just to them, but to the version of you they thought they knew. But here's where it turns. You can love them, and leave the script. You can respect them, and rewrite the story. You can honor the past without becoming a prisoner of it. Because you were not put on this planet to fulfill a checklist. You were meant to become, to create, to fall apart and start again, on your terms. To chase what's true, not what's safe. And when you do, when you finally reclaim that quiet voice you've ignored for years, you'll notice something strange, that the ache starts to fade. That life begins to feel like your skin fits again. That the pressure to impress, explain or justify melts into something softer, calmer, freedom. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not a movie moment. It's a quiet morning where you wake up and realize, I'm not performing anymore, I'm here. And just like that, you begin to remember who you were before you were trained to forget. But this remembering, it's not a finish line, it's a beginning, and the very next trap is already waiting. Because now that you've stopped performing for your parents, you'll be tempted to perform for the world. The audience just shifts. The applause just changes tone, from "make your family proud" to "make your followers obsessed." And once again, the pressure creeps back in. This time not from home, but from the endless buzzing stage of the internet. You avoid cringe, risk, and rejection, and accidentally avoid your actual life, because deep down, you've mistaken safety for peace, when in truth, it's often just fear in a prettier outfit. You tell yourself you're being wise, that you're protecting your energy, that you're being careful, and at first it sounds reasonable, responsible even. But when every decision becomes a calculation to avoid discomfort, what you're really doing is cutting yourself off from everything real, from growth, from spontaneity, from love, from failure, yes, but also from becoming someone interesting enough to even have stories worth telling. It starts innocently, declining the opportunity to speak up in a group, even though your thoughts are burning inside you. Ignoring the urge to post something meaningful online because what if it flops? Not going to that event, because you might not know anyone. Staying in relationships that feel tepid because at least they don't hurt. Bit by bit, you teach your nervous system that discomfort equals danger, and when you do that long enough, anything unpredictable becomes a threat. Even joy, even intimacy, even your own damn desires. The worst part, you don't even realize it's happening, because the modern world will congratulate you for it. It calls you balanced, mature, selective, but really you're just hiding. You've made your life so small that nothing can truly threaten it, or touch it, or change it, and now you've convinced yourself that's how it's supposed to be. But life doesn't happen in well-lit hallways where everything makes sense. Life happens in dark rooms with music too loud, in first drafts that read like disasters, in late-night voice notes you regret the next day, in unfinished thoughts said out loud before they're perfect. Life happens when you're a little messy, a little exposed, a little not in control, but you don't trust that version of you, because you've spent too long idolizing the polished self, the curated one, the rehearsed one, the one that's always 10 steps ahead of judgment, and because of that, you never learn to feel safe being unready. You chase healing, but you avoid chaos, forgetting that all real transformation starts with a kind of chaos. You want change, but not the kind that shakes your identity. You want growth, but you want it tidy, and so you stay stuck, half-bloomed, almost expressive, nearly brave, and then one day you look in the mirror and realize that the safest version of you, the most palatable one, is also the least alive. And here's the worst bit, the part that stings like lemon on an open cut. All that comfort you built around yourself, it didn't save you from pain. It just delayed it, postponed it, until it shows up in weirder, heavier ways, like numbness, like emptiness, like an unshakable feeling that you're missing something, even when your calendar is full and your skincare is on point. See, the human spirit wasn't designed to be kept under perfect conditions. It was designed to adapt, to rupture, to grow wild and uneven and ugly and breathtaking. When you confuse safety for growth, you trade vitality for predictability, you trade fire for lukewarm, and then you wonder why you feel bored in your own life, like you're playing a character instead of being a person. But here's something your algorithms won't tell you. Being alive isn't always aesthetic. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's clumsy, sometimes it's getting rejected after you said exactly what was on your heart, sometimes it's launching something that no one notices, sometimes it's leaving a perfectly fine life, because your soul wants a loud one, and yes, it's terrifying, of course it is. But fear is not the enemy, avoidance is. Fear has always been part of the recipe. The ones you admire, the bold, the expressive, the magnetic ones, they don't lack fear, they just stopped worshipping it. So you can stay safe, you can keep avoiding cringe and chaos, you can keep refining yourself until you're indistinguishable from everyone else who did the same, or you can take one stupid, trembling, uncertain action towards something that actually excites you, and risk being misunderstood, unliked, or even laughed at. And when you do, when you let your knees shake and your voice crack and your ego bleed, you start to wake up, because suddenly you're not avoiding your life. You're in it, you're participating, you're risking being real. And that's where the next version of you begins. The one who isn't owned by fear, the one who doesn't need to be everyone's favorite, the one who doesn't need everything to be safe in order for it to be worth it. You know your attachment style. You can name every single one of your toxic traits. You've read the threads, saved the infographics, and you can recite your entire trauma timeline like it's your favorite playlist. But what's changed? You've memorized the map, but never actually left the driveway. You talk about your patterns with almost too much comfort, like someone who's proud of identifying their prison, but too scared to walk out of it. And that's where the real trap begins. The illusion of growth. You've intellectualized your wounds so well, they've become part of your identity. Healing became branding, insight became armor, but insight on its own does nothing. You can know why you push people away, you can understand your avoidant tendencies, your inner child issues, your fear of intimacy, and still ghost someone who cares. You can say, I know I self-sabotage, and still do it, again and again, because self-awareness without accountability is just ego with a prettier name. It's the spiritual bypass in therapy lingo, a performance of depth that avoids the actual fall. See, knowing your flaws doesn't make you brave, acting on them does. Changing the script mid-scene, fumbling your lines, risking looking unstable while trying to build stability, that's the actual work. But most people don't want the actual work. They want a diagnosis, a meme, a label, something that tells them, you're not broken, just misunderstood. And that's true, but it's also incomplete. You may not be broken, but you're still responsible. Responsibility is not shame, it's not blame, it's power. The power to stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. The most dangerous thing about modern self-awareness culture is that it lets you get high off reflection. You can analyze yourself endlessly. You can speak in therapy speak. You can say, I have a fear of abandonment, while actively abandoning anyone who tries to get close. You can call your partner emotionally unavailable, when really, you're just emotionally evasive. We like the words more than the silence they require, more than the accountability they demand. And slowly, your self-awareness becomes a weapon, a justification, a mirror you use to admire your understanding, instead of using it to clean the mess. And the worst part, people will clap for it. Online, people will applaud your honesty. Wow, you're so in tune with your emotions. No one asks if you've actually changed. No one holds you accountable for turning awareness into action. That's your job, and it's lonely, quiet, messy. There's a reason real healing isn't viral. It doesn't look good. It's awkward apologies, nervous boundary setting, walking into rooms and owning your triggers instead of projecting them. It's choosing to not repeat the same script, even when your body is screaming for the old rhythm. And that's terrifying. That's grief. That's growth. You kill parts of yourself you once clung to, the defensiveness, the overthinking, the silent treatments, the manipulation you swore wasn't manipulation. You let them die. That's not pretty. That's not aesthetic. That's real. And once you start, you realize something terrifying. The more you heal, the less you talk about it. The less you try to convince people you're self-aware. You just are. You just do better. The words shrink, and the actions grow. You start losing the need to explain your pain in poetic terms. You just feel it. And then, when it's done with you, you move, and you will move. Maybe slowly, maybe clumsily, but you will. You'll stop being fascinated with the why, and start living in the what now. And that shift, that subtle quiet shift, is everything. Because now you're not a mirror, reflecting damage. You're a window. You let new light in. You make space for what doesn't fit your past, for what scares your survival brain. You show up, you stay, you love, even when your hands shake. You stop using your history as an excuse for your cruelty. You get soft in places you kept hard for decades. That's where the real self-awareness begins, not in the language of your wounds, but in the behavior you choose despite them. And it's not perfect. You will mess up, you will backslide, but even your mistakes will look different. You'll own them faster, repair better. You'll see yourself not as a victim of your wiring, but as the author of what comes next. And that next chapter isn't written in psychology terms or self-help quotes. It's written in how you show up when no one is watching, when it's boring, when it's hard, when it's you versus you, because at some point you stop calling it healing, and just call it living. You've learned to fear looking stupid more than actually being stupid. And the truth is, this is how most brilliant lives get quietly buried, not with failure, not even with fear, but with shame. The kind of shame that wraps around your neck when you think about speaking up in a room where people might know more than you. You keep quiet, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you're terrified someone might think it's wrong, cringe, or not deep enough. So you end up hoarding your thoughts like contraband. Your ideas decay inside you, untouched, unspoken. You know what's worse? You actually believe you're being humble. You pat yourself on the back for listening and learning, when really you're hiding. You're not absorbing. You're shrinking. Shrinking in the name of intelligence. Shrinking in the name of waiting until I'm sure. But genius never starts with certainty. It starts with risk. It starts with risk. It starts with awkward sentences, half-baked questions, bold misunderstandings that lead to real clarity. Your silence isn't wisdom. It's compliance to a system that only rewards those loud enough to risk being wrong. It's wild how many people in history were laughed at before they were revered. Think about it. The Wright brothers, they tried to fly. People thought they were out of their minds. Nikola Tesla, obsessed with invisible forces. The world labeled him mad. Even artists like Van Gogh. He sold one painting in his lifetime. Was he stupid then? Or were people just too stupid to see? The line is thin, but here's the key. They all looked stupid before they became legends. They looked delusional, naive, unpolished, and they acted anyway. Meanwhile, you keep writing in your notes app, keep sketching in the margins, keep whispering your truths to yourself in the dark. You won't post that video, you won't pitch that idea, you won't start the thing, because someone might laugh. And here's the truth you hate to hear. No one is thinking about you as much as you are. Their judgments, fleeting, your silence, permanent. Which is worse? When you become more obsessed with perception than creation, you become an echo of others, a carbon copy of what you think people want. You end up intelligent but empty, wise but cowardly. You know all the facts, but you've done none of the living, and living requires embarrassment. It requires putting your name on something that might fall apart. It means walking into a room full of experts and saying, I might be wrong, but here's what I think. That's not stupidity. That's spiritual bravery. There's a sickness in this generation masked as self-awareness. Everyone is so hyper-aware of how they're being perceived, that they never actually become anything. They curate, they rehearse, they manifest confidence like it's a mood board. But confidence is not a candle you light and sit by. It's a war, a loud, clumsy, trembling war between who you are and who you pretend to be. It doesn't start when you feel ready. It starts when you risk looking ridiculous. It starts when you stand up and say something everyone else is too polite, too scared, or too passive to say. So if you're waiting to be polished, to be approved, to be applauded, you'll die waiting. Let them call you foolish. Let them misunderstand. Let them snicker. Your job is to burn louder than their doubt. The world doesn't need another clever, quiet person taking notes from the sidelines. It needs someone who's unafraid to crack their voice when they speak. Someone whose knees shake when they stand. Because that's real, that's human, that's how movements are born, not from perfection, but from courage so raw, it almost looks insane. And that leads you to the real test. Will you keep letting fear of perception dull your voice, or will you finally say it? The thing you've been rehearsing in your head for years. Because after all this time hiding, the only thing left to fear is staying invisible. You're always in a season of growth, always working on yourself, always peeling back another layer of trauma, another childhood wound, another belief that doesn't serve you. You speak the language of healing fluently. Your TikTok is full of it. Your journals are full of it. Your friends hear about it every time you meet. You're in touch with your inner child. You've mapped your triggers. You've color-coded your emotional cycles. And yet, somehow, you're stuck. You've become a professional patient. Every setback is fuel for more introspection. Every conflict is another opportunity to reanalyze your past. You've read enough books to build a tower, but it never becomes a bridge. You've done the work, but oddly, there's nothing concrete to show for it, except more layers, more self-analysis, more processing. It's almost seductive, this kind of perpetual becoming. You convince yourself that as long as you're healing, you're progressing. But healing, when weaponized against life itself, becomes just another comfort zone, one with softer lighting and better vocabulary. You've built a shrine out of your wounds, and called it self-awareness. You're not chasing freedom, you're worshipping the process. But here's the truth, no one wants to say out loud. Some of you aren't healing anymore. You're hiding. You use the word boundaries when you mean avoidance. You say energy doesn't align when you're scared of being wrong. You avoid responsibility by calling it protecting your peace. You ghost opportunities, relationships, even joy, because deep down you've confused growth with delay. Healing has become your aesthetic. But aesthetics don't change lives. Action does. There's a point where healing must translate into motion. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to prove that you are not a shrine to your pain. You are a person with agency. Your past might explain you, but it cannot define your calendar forever. Otherwise, you're just decorating your cell and calling it transformation. You don't need another journal. You need a job. You don't need another affirmation. You need accountability. You don't need another energy cleanse. You need to call your damn parents. You don't need more time to feel ready. You need to pick up the phone, walk out the door, raise your hand in that meeting, apply for that thing, and make a fool of yourself if you have to. You've waited long enough for the healing to make you whole. Maybe wholeness isn't waiting at the end of the tunnel. Maybe it's created in the act of living, not thinking, because healing is not a place you arrive at. It's not the trophy you get after suffering. It's not a 12-step plan that delivers you to confidence and clarity and cosmic peace. Healing is only meaningful when it stops being the focus and starts being the foundation. The point is not to keep fixing yourself forever. The point is to become someone who knows they are already whole, even if a little scratched, a little messy, a little unsure. You don't need to be fully healed to be impactful. You don't need to wait until you're emotionally invincible to be useful to the world. The people who change things, the people who make a dent in the universe, are rarely the most balanced or resolved. They are often chaotic, unfinished, uncertain, but they move anyway. They show up anyway. They speak even when their voice shakes. They try even when their hands tremble. They begin even when they still carry the weight of every year they lost. Because they know healing is a chapter, not the whole book. Some of you are still in the waiting room, because it feels safe. But healing is not a house you live in forever. It's a hospital. You get in, get what you need, and get out. Staying too long only makes you sicker in a different way, because you forget that life doesn't happen in recovery, it happens in risk. And the harsh truth is, no one is going to come drag you out of that room. No therapist, no coach, no quote on your feed will do it for you. You have to decide on a random Tuesday maybe, that it's time to act, time to love, time to speak, time to contribute, time to matter, and maybe that's how you actually heal, not by endlessly picking at the wound, but by proving to yourself that the wound doesn't run your life anymore. Because while you were busy trying to become, you forgot how to be, and being, that's the scariest, most radical act left in a world that thrives on your confusion. So walk out, let the waiting room miss you, let your old fears wonder where you went, let your healing become invisible, not because it didn't happen, but because it doesn't have to announce itself anymore. You're not broken, you're just overdue. You shapeshift to be loved. You shrink to fit. Now, you're just a reflection, not a person. And maybe it started subtly. Maybe you laughed at a joke that didn't land. Maybe you agreed with a viewpoint that felt wrong in your bones. Maybe you wore a version of yourself that you thought they'd adore. One harmless compromise at a time, because love, in your mind, was something to earn. Something fragile that could vanish the moment you showed too much of yourself. So you tucked the chaos away, you muted the loud parts, and then, without even realizing it, you became digestible. It feels like safety at first, like strategy, as if playing small is noble, as if loving someone means giving them the power to edit you. You tell yourself it's emotional intelligence, that you're being considerate, but deep down, a voice you keep silencing keeps whispering, you're losing something, and it's right. You're not being loved, you're being curated, because when you mold yourself into a fantasy, they never get the truth, and worse, neither do you. You start to feel it in the quiet, the conversations where your real opinions don't show up, the clothes you wear that don't feel like you, the music you pretend to like, the goals you suddenly downplay. You say things like, I'm easygoing, and I don't really care, until you genuinely forget what you do care about. You talk about your dreams in a past tense. You laugh at yourself mid-sentence. You clip your own wings before anyone else has a chance to. This isn't love, this is emotional shape-shifting, and it's a survival mechanism, one that often traces back to childhood, when love felt conditional, when being too much, or too different, got you silence, shame or withdrawal. So now you overcorrect, you over-accommodate, you perform likability, but underneath, you're exhausted, starving even, for the kind of connection where you don't have to rehearse. The saddest part is that you might get the love you were auditioning for, but it will never nourish you, because it's not love for you, it's for the role you played, and so the relationship becomes a stage, and every day you perform your disappearance, slowly, silently, heartbreakingly, until the mirror you're reflecting starts to crack, because that version of you, the agreeable, adaptable, lovable one, isn't real, and pretending to be someone else for love, is the fastest way to forget who you are. But here's the truth, No one wants to say real love might require rejection first. It might mean losing the people who only liked the mask. It might mean sitting alone on the floor of your room, wondering if authenticity was a mistake. It wasn't. It never is. Because self-erasure in the name of connection is just abandonment, dressed in affection. You deserve more than love that only reaches surface level. You deserve someone who doesn't need you to fit, but wants to understand how you expand. And no, reclaiming yourself won't feel glamorous at first. It'll feel like guilt, like fear, like being too much again. But slowly, with every truth you speak out loud, with every no you say to something that makes you smaller, a strange thing happens. You begin to feel solid, less ghost, more spine. You remember your favorite music. You say your real opinions. You tell stories you used to bury. You return to the version of yourself you abandoned for someone else's comfort. When love stops being a transaction, personality becomes a home again, not a product. You start magnetizing people who resonate with your truth, not your costume. You notice your laugh gets louder, your spine straighter, your words less filtered. Your world doesn't shrink for affection anymore. It expands because of it, and it ripples. You stop needing approval to feel worthy. You stop monitoring how others react just to feel safe. You stop assuming that being loved means being quiet. You realize you never had to twist yourself into something prettier. You just had to stop hiding what was already brilliant. Because when you finally stop chasing acceptance by shaving off your edges, you discover something terrifying and liberating. The real you was never unlovable, just untried. And from here something bigger begins, something deeper than affection, a desire to actually live in your skin, not borrow someone else's, not tiptoe around intimacy, but to stand fully, as yourself, even if it shakes. Because if the cost of love is your identity, it's not love, it's erasure in disguise. And now that you know, it's not possible to go back, not really. The mirror's cracked, but it's finally reflecting something real. So speak, be messy, take up space, let someone love the person you almost buried. And if they don't, good. That rejection just saved you from the longest betrayal of all, the one where you abandon yourself to be chosen. You intellectualize all your emotions. You can tell someone exactly why you're sad, what childhood wound it ties back to, which attachment style it activates, and what your therapist once said about it. You're self-aware, dangerously so, but you're still hollow inside, because the truth is, you haven't felt anything in years. We've built a world that applauds our ability to explain everything, but we've forgotten how to experience it. Emotions have become case studies. Pain has become content. Instead of crying, we journal. Instead of grieving, we listen to a podcast about grief. Instead of breaking down, we open a Notion template called emotional regulation. You're not processing. You're managing. You're performing inner work like a job you're afraid of being fired from. And somehow, all this work still leaves you unfulfilled, still detached, still narrating your trauma, instead of living beyond it. It's not your fault entirely. You were taught that emotions are messy, irrational, inconvenient, that if you just understand your sadness, you'll outsmart it. You treat your heart like a science experiment. You observe it from a distance. You name it, categorize it, dissect it, but you never touch it. You never sit with it, raw and wordless, and allow it to burn, because that's too vulnerable. That's not productive. That's not shareable. But the healing is in the mess. Real growth starts when the theories fall apart, when you stop talking and start trembling, when you can't explain what you're feeling, only that it hurts like hell. That's the kind of honesty that breaks patterns, the kind that rewires something ancient inside you. But that requires bravery, and most people would rather be smart than brave. You've gotten so good at being aware, but awareness isn't wisdom. Wisdom is lived. It's soaked in tears and silence and mistakes, and sometimes, the most transformative thing you can do isn't to analyze your pain, but to let it break you open, fully, without wrapping it in metaphors or quoting your favorite book. Just feel it like a wave, and let it crush the parts of you that need to die. That's not weakness, that's rebirth. When you intellectualize emotions, you never fully enter them, and when you don't fully enter them, you never fully leave them. That's why you stay stuck in loops. You've processed the same issue 20 times, and yet it still triggers you. Why? Because you never felt it. You thought about it. You built theories around it. But feelings don't dissolve through logic. They dissolve through surrender. And surrender is terrifying for a mind that's addicted to control. You're afraid that if you really go into that feeling, that old shame, that heartbreak, that betrayal, it'll consume you, that you won't come back. But what if it's the opposite? What if the only way back to yourself is through that very storm? You weren't meant to avoid the fire. You were meant to walk through it and come out clearer, softer, more whole. Stop hiding behind language. Stop mistaking eloquence for depth. You don't need more words. You need more silence. You need to stop being impressive and start being true. That moment where you admit you don't know, where you can't explain it. That's the doorway. That's the real you knocking. And once you've walked through that door, once you've cried in a way that has no caption, no lesson, no aesthetic, you'll start to live differently. You'll stop needing to be understood all the time. You'll stop dressing your wounds up in smart-sounding quotes. You'll stop pretending you're healing when you're just dissociating with fancier tools. That's when things shift. That's when your personality stops being a mask and starts being a mirror, reflecting the actual experience of being alive. Because life isn't something to be explained, it's something to be felt, fully, deeply, uncomfortably, beautifully. And when you finally feel what you've been avoiding, when you scream into your pillow without needing to make it poetic, something cracks open, something old dies, and that death creates space for softness, for aliveness, for joy that isn't tied to performance, for laughter that doesn't need to be understood, because then, only then, you'll stop fearing your own depth. And once you're no longer afraid to feel, you'll finally be ready to believe something dangerous and beautiful. You don't need to understand yourself to be yourself. You believe what influencers believe, because thinking is tiring, research, too long, reading, for nerds, and now you don't know where your opinions end and someone else's marketing begins. That's the part no one wants to admit. We're not lazy, we're scared that if we truly thought for ourselves, we might land somewhere unpopular, somewhere uncomfortable, somewhere outside the algorithm's warmth. So instead, we swallow aesthetic beliefs, trendy moral takes, Instagram deep spirituality. We start saying things like, I'm protecting my peace, when what we really mean is, I'm too afraid to have a difficult conversation. We use terms like vibe, energy, and alignment to justify avoidance. We manifest what we don't work for, and somehow, we feel more evolved for doing it. But let's be honest, this isn't soul-searching, it's Pinterest therapy, with zero depth. Manifestation was never meant to be this. It was never supposed to be an excuse to avoid accountability, or a cover for entitlement. The original idea, that your mindset affects your actions and your reality, was powerful. But what we've done with it, is embarrassing. You think if you journal enough and make pretty vision boards, things will shift in your favor. Meanwhile, you're ignoring your habits, your laziness, your unresolved trauma, and your very real patterns of self-sabotage. Manifestation is not magic, it's repetition. It's facing your shadow and choosing differently. It's small, consistent action in the direction of your future self, not whispered affirmations from the comfort of your avoidance cocoon. You don't attract a life you aren't structurally preparing for, and you sure as hell don't deserve credit for being in the process when you haven't moved in months. But it's easier to blame the universe, easier to pretend your desires are noble and pure, while your discipline is non-existent. You say you're co-creating with the cosmos. That's cute. But let's be real, you're just avoiding responsibility in a glittery, self-soothing way. That's not manifestation. That's intellectual laziness dipped in self-help glitter. And you're not the only one. Our entire culture encourages this. Everyone wants transformation without discomfort, healing without confrontation, enlightenment without humility. So we follow charismatic strangers on the internet and start parroting their beliefs like gospel. We stop reading, stop researching, stop questioning. We even stop listening, really, because we've confused confidence with truth. This is how belief becomes performance. You don't actually live by your values. You just say the right things, in the right tone, to the right people. You align yourself with trends instead of principles. You don't stand for anything, you just blend in. And slowly, silently, your original personality, the real one, the one that used to be curious and uncomfortable, and willing to wrestle with nuance, begins to dissolve. Your inner compass gets outsourced to whatever sounds empowering, whatever makes you look wise, whatever gains followers. But wisdom doesn't trend, and truth is rarely digestible. So here you are, a mimic with an aesthetic, a shell with excellent taste. You've got all the right words, none of the real roots. You wear spirituality like a costume, and wonder why you still feel empty when the lights go off. Here's the part that hurts. You don't know what you believe anymore. because you never had to work for it. And when beliefs cost you nothing, they mean nothing. That's why they break so easily. You're not lost because you lack motivation. You're lost because your map is borrowed, and no one taught you how to make your own. So now every decision you make feels like theft. Every path you take feels pre-walked. Every sentence you say echoes someone else's voice. And slowly, you stop trusting your own. That's the final death of a personality, not when it disappears, but when it still speaks, in other people's voices. And you can feel it, can't you? That ache under all the posing. The tiny sting in your gut when you repost another surface-deep quote, knowing you don't live it. The irritation when someone challenges you, not because they're wrong, but because deep down you have nothing to stand on. That's not anger. That's hollowness. You don't need another vision board. You need a belief system you've actually suffered for, wrestled with, bled for. One that didn't come with a soft piano track and a Canva template. The next time someone asks you, what do you believe? I hope you don't reach for a screenshot. I hope you don't quote your favorite guru, or podcast or Pinterest post. I hope you pause, sit in the heat of it, and speak only what your own experience has carved into your bones. Because that's the only voice that was ever meant to be yours. And maybe, just maybe, that's where we start reclaiming you. You're still planning, still prepping, still becoming. You tell yourself it's all part of the process, the perfect strategy, the ideal version of yourself, the right time. You've got vision boards, dream journals, curated routines, but somehow, you're still there, still thinking, still dreaming, still not moving. You've mistaken preparation for progress and called it self-awareness. Maybe it started with a quote, "When you're ready, the universe will align." Sounds poetic, almost divine, but maybe you forgot that the universe doesn't align for people standing still. It aligns with movement, messy, unsure, wobbly movement. The kind that makes your voice shake in a meeting. The kind where you submit the work you know isn't perfect. The kind where you show up anyway, even if no one claps. You didn't need to be ready, you just needed to begin. But the lie of readiness is seductive. It tells you that you're just one more book away from brilliance, one more month away from confidence, one more silent retreat away from becoming the version of you who finally deserves to be seen. So you wait, you rehearse your greatness privately, you build empires in your head, but nothing leaves your hands, and with every passing week, your unique voice, that beautiful mess of contradictions, gets quieter under the weight of all the maybes. Manifestation isn't just about imagining your life into existence. It's not a vision board glued together with delusion. It's a process of identity, a decision to stop outsourcing your timeline, to say this version of me, flawed, confused, in transition, is allowed to act. When you move from there, your energy changes. The world doesn't bend for confidence. It bends for intention, for fire, for irrational action that dares to begin before perfection arrives. You don't manifest by waiting, you manifest by making. The awkward first attempt, the terrible first draft, the underwhelming first launch. These are the portals. They're not glamorous, they won't go viral, but they will teach you who you are when the audience isn't looking. And that person, the one who acts without applause, is the one the universe listens to. Because that's not performance, that's alignment. You see, this illusion of needing to be ready is often just fear dressed in spiritual language. And fear loves comfort. Fear will convince you that preparation is noble, that thinking counts as progress, that visualizing is as good as doing. But manifestation is not a gentle prayer, it's a punch, a wild decision to live as if the life you want already exists, and you're just walking into it without permission. Most people never cross that threshold. They intellectualize their dreams into extinction. They stay in the pre-phase forever, and they'll call it wisdom. I'm being strategic, they'll say, or I'm just not there yet. But time doesn't pause for your perfectionism, it just passes, quietly, unapologetically, until one day you look up and realize you built nothing but potential. But you don't have to wait anymore. Not for a better version of yourself, not for a sign, not for the right words, the right lighting, the right moment. The moment is now. It's ugly, it's raw, it's filled with doubt, but it's real, and that makes it sacred. Because at some point, you have to become the kind of person who doesn't need the stars to align, who doesn't need external permission to speak, who doesn't need proof to start building. You become the kind of person who acts, who begins without the applause, who moves while shaking. And that person, the one who acts without guarantee, is the most dangerous kind of creator. Because the world doesn't change when perfect people speak. It changes when real people decide that being in motion is worth more than waiting for approval. So let this be your motion. Let this be the point where you stop waiting for the better you, and start building with what you have. Because this version of you, he's already enough. Not someday, not when it's polished, not when it's applauded, now, as he is.